Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. There's an upcoming fight, and it's big. It's in the light heavyweight division. It's a rematch between Chad Dawson and the man who beat him for the first time in his career, Pascal. Now, normally I would take Dawson, just as I did in the first fight. I feel that Chad Dawson, simply put, has more talent. I believe that Chad Dawson has a better technique. I feel that Chad Dawson is the only one who's going to be effective if the two guys fight close to each other for sustained periods of time. I also think that Chad Dawson has the better stamina. I believe that the Chad Dawson who fought and beat Bernard Hopkins would be able to take apart Pascal. Also, Pascal's win, I'm not here to diminish it, but in Pascal's win over Dawson, Pascal employed certain tactics that Dawson now has seen. I believe those were really one-time off type tactics. In other words, an ambush style where he would jump in and throw hand speed. Dawson has now seen the speed. Dawson now fully appreciates the fact that Pascal tries to bank rounds early. So Dawson, I'm assuming, because of course last fight he was running out of time before a cut ended the fight and they went to the scorecards, I'm assuming Dawson is going to come in the ring prepared to be more active with a quicker start. Right? So I'm not sure if Pascal's effectiveness in the first fight is going to carry over to this fight. But as a gambler, I'm staying on the sidelines, right? And I'm staying for the sidelines because of what's happening with Dawson outside of the ring. Let me say this. Dawson had a trainer for his first fight against Pascal, and that trainer was the former light heavyweight champion, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Right? Now, Muhammad certainly knows boxing, but every trainer brings with them a certain style. And for whatever reason, under Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Chad Dawson was a bit lethargic in the ring, especially early in fights. Right? Also, Dawson seemed to, again, for whatever reason, have some stamina problems. So if you look at Dawson at the end of the Antonio Tarver fights, it's the older Tarver who seems to have more gas left in the tank. It's only a tribute to Dawson's brilliance that while looking nonchalant and while not appearing to have great stamina, Dawson somehow in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of fights would put together enough of a show to win the fights. Right? The problem was Dawson's lack of energy in pumping a jab from the outset, and Dawson's just lack of awareness that boxing is actually part of the entertainment business, and he's supposed to entertain the fans and the judges. Right? You can't show up, have the sport mapped out mathematically, lackadaisically connect the dots, and expect to look charismatic on the judges' scorecards. So Dawson changed trainers, or I should say changed back trainers. He went back to an earlier trainer that he had in his career, John the Iceman Scully, who like Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, had an extensive pro career. In fact, John Scully, who was one of the country's more decorated amateurs, actually did fight for the IBF Light Heavyweight Championship against Henry Maskey, and while he lost the fight, he actually went the full 12 rounds. In other words, we're talking about trainers who happen to have been in the upper echelons of the sports rankings as fighters, right? These are guys who either held a title, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, or who fought for major titles in the case of John Scully. Now, when Hopkins fought Dawson, Dawson came out, and Dawson actually was pumping the jab, right? By the way, as an aside, in my opinion, Dawson always pumps the jab. It's just that under Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, he did so nonchalantly that when you looked at the CompuBox numbers, they were always surprising. Well, Dawson came out against Hopkins and was actually inspired in what was, I believe, probably the biggest victory of his career. You know, keep in mind, even today, Dawson is not a household name. It was probably the biggest win of his career. Dawson came out and took Hopkins's title, right? Pumping a jab, actually survived a lot of headbutts and stuff like that early, kept his focus, actually finished strong in the fight, did a great job, redeemed himself somewhat, right? Keep in mind, he fought Hopkins twice. The first fight was the infamous throwdown fight. Then it's the second fight where Dawson came out and I thought left no doubt on who won the fight, right? After that, Dawson decides to publicly call out one of the best in the sport pound for pound. I give him credit for it, right? We want great fighters fighting each other. The problem, though, is the devil's in the details. How you structure the deal matters. He calls out the champ at 168, I believe the best at 168, Andre Ward. And rather than say, hey, Andre, you meet me in the middle, right? I'm the champ at 175. You're the champ at 168. Let's meet at 172. And let's get this on. And let's do it in some place like Vegas or Atlantic City or Staples Center, Los Angeles, or Madison Square Garden, New York City, or Joe Louis Arena, Detroit. Rather than say something like that, instead, Chad Dawson says, hey, I can beat you in your own kingdom at 168. And oh, I'm willing to do it in your arena in Oakland, California. Right? So I'm going to fight one of the best in the sport pound for pound in his weight class, in his house, to prove that I'm the best. Now, while I give Dawson credit for the audacity, apparently the execution was harder than it looked. We now know from a great source, his trainer, John Scully, the man who Dawson hired to replace Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, that Dawson had a very hard time losing weight. Right? All I'm saying is it would be like preparing for the SAT. And or some other exam, the bar exam, or whatever your exam is in your profession, right? To have a test, to know that you're going to be judged against the other students. And while they get to just prepare for the test, you actually have to prepare for the test and lose 7 pounds in a matter of months. So while you're at the gym, while you're in the sauna, while you're in the kitchen counting calories, the other side is literally able to dive into the subject matter and spend their time learning math, reading comprehension, what have you, right? You're at a disadvantage. Well, here, while Andre Ward was able to look at tapes of Chad Dawson, figure things out, focus on the fight, Chad Dawson was focusing on his calorie count. It showed in the ring. He had a hard time losing weight. He had an even harder time in the fight. Let me also point out, too, that in the fight, I believe one of the secrets of the fight, and this has to be said, is that just like Ricky Burns figured out that he could land on Kevin Mitchell a high right hand, and I'm sure Burns knew that because he had sparred with Mitchell, right? And he could look at tapes. Andre Ward appears to have figured out, by looking at Chad Dawson tapes and by looking at the Bernard Hopkins fight film, right, where Bernard is coming inside at angles, that he could come inside at an angle and land a high left hand on Chad Dawson. I believe it's a secret to the fight, as I've said in other videos too. Just looking at the films, I believe Andre Ward might be a lefty fighting righty, right? Or at a minimum ambidextrous, right? And so Ward's left hand might be his dominant hand. Well, anyway, Chad Dawson doesn't guard well against that punch, and hasn't for a long time. It cost him against Andre Ward. Well, now Chad Dawson has decided to change trainers again, right? And he's going back to Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, the trainer who he had problems with before he hired John Scully, the same trainer who was in his corner when he gave away the early rounds against Jean Pascal and had to try to catch up late in the fight and was unable to do so, right? When I see a fighter playing hopscotch with trainers right before a big fight, for me that's a red flag. I don't care how talented I think Chad Dawson is. He's playing hopscotch with trainers. He has a big fight coming up, and he just got beat up. Knocked down multiple times by Andre Ward, right? I'm one of those guys who believes that when you've been knocked down multiple times in a big fight, especially when you really weren't your natural weight, and keep in mind, that's when guys get badly hurt. The last place you want to be is to be in the ring against elite competition in your very next fight. I don't like where Chad Dawson is at this point of his career. I'm hesitant, even though I think he, in my opinion, clearly is the best fighter in this fight. Let me also say this about Jean Pascal. Understand who Jean Pascal is. This sport has some warriors. This guy is one of them, right? The problem is he'll fight guys who he is unprepared to fight, right? He takes on all comers, and he does so whether he's ready or not. I believe this personality type is very different than Floyd Mayweather's, because I believe Mayweather only accepts fights that he already has a blueprint on how to beat the opponent, right? I believe that Mayweather, when you hear a fight announced that Mayweather's fighting someone, you know that Mayweather has studied film on that opponent and already feels that he knows how to beat that opponent. I believe Jean Pascal is the opposite personality type, right? I believe Jean Pascal wants to fight the best. If another fighter who's elite says, okay, let's fight, I believe Jean Pascal rushes to sign the contract thinking that he'll figure out how to beat the opponent. So, of course, not many in the sport would say, while they're unbeaten, while the other fighter is unbeaten, okay, Carl Froch, I'll fight you, and I'll do it in Nottingham, England, right? Understand who Jean Pascal has fought. He's fought Carl Froch, and he's fought Chad Dawson, right? And he's fought some other guys who are very tough matchups, Adrian Diacanu and stuff like that. If you follow Jean Pascal's career, of course he's fought Bernard Hopkins multiple times. You'll see a list of very hard opponents. Jean Pascal needs to be put in that category of the Carl Froch, Evander Holyfield, Glenn Johnson, I'll take on all comers group, right? That's who he is. So, understand too, this personality type. He's such a warrior that he had a fight where his shoulder popped out during the fight, right? Now, all I could say is many fighters would be concerned about their health and would say, hey, you know what? Tonight's not my night. I have a dislocated shoulder in the middle of a fight. The other guy has won. I'm going to get medical attention for this, and we'll do this again down the road. Not Jean Pascal. He goes to his corner. I'm not kidding. A couple of guys stand up, and in the middle of the fight, between rounds, a corner man popped Pascal's shoulder back into the joint. And Pascal went back out there and hung on and won the fight. That's who he is. The point I'm making here is that the rumor is that Jean Pascal still has problems with the shoulder, has health problems. Now understand, some guys, they could be shot. They're still on the battlefield. They still go through with the battle, right? That's Pascal's mindset. I believe Pascal, no matter what problems Chad Dawson is having, I believe Pascal has problems of his own. You need to Google Pascal's health, because this is the kind of guy who would fight you with a sprained ankle. So I don't have confidence in this fight. I think it's a must-see fight. I think it's, really the ultimate warrior mentality, Jean Pascal, against a guy who, quite frankly, blames trainers for some of the mistakes he has made in his career. And I think it's hurt him, right? And so I look forward to Dawson against Pascal. But if you're looking for my opinion on this fight, I'm going to be on the sidelines. What I would expect to happen in the fight, right? I'm not going to bet on the fight. What I expect to happen in the fight is Dawson to come out, start faster, and literally, beat up Jean Pascal methodically. I know Pascal won the first fight, but all I'm saying is it was an ambush style. If Dawson is prepared to follow Pascal after the ambush, I believe Dawson wins the fight by a wider margin than Bernard Hopkins beat Pascal in the rematch. Pascal's style isn't as effective the second time around. You saw that in the Hopkins-Pascal rematch. I believe Chad Dawson could make easy work of this. But understand, Dawson is coming off of a change of trainers. Dawson is coming off of a multiple knockdown loss. Dawson is gaining weight to get back to his regular weight. You see a fighter yo-yoing in weight, that's a recipe for disaster. Be careful on this one. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for watching.